And now for our closing discussion. Please welcome Kashmir Hill, reporter at the New York Times, and panelist Stephen Schmidt, Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer at Amazon, Josh Hedges, on the product policy team at OpenAI, Natasha Eastman, Head of Threat Intelligence at CoreWeave, and Drew Bagley, Chief Privacy Officer at CrowdStrike.
Hello. You've almost made it to the end of the day. Congratulations. Before I start the panel, whenever I write about some of these companies, I have to do disclosures, so I'll do them for the panel as well. My employer at the New York Times has a licensing deal with Amazon, and the New York Times is suing OpenAI for copyright infringement, and they deny those claims. So with that, I was hoping that we could just start. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of this session, but the Anthropic report about the cyber espionage. Wanted to ask the panel, you guys have all read the report. What did you find surprising in it, if anything?
I'll start off here, if you don't mind. It's an interesting evolution in the effects that we see from cyber actors. We anticipated that this was going to happen. It's interesting to see it in the open press. When you look at what the best demonstrations that came out of that were, that there are tools that can be used to achieve specific ends with specific velocity changes, which are really interesting. It's you can orchestrate these together, though, that's the really cool part. Cool for an attacker, cool for a defender as well.
Yeah, I think we were joking backstage that, to me, the report was kind of interesting in that it was almost like an ink blot test, and it almost said as much about the reader as everybody else. It's been a while since I've seen something generate just so many divergent, very hot takes. I think it's important to kind of put it in context a little bit too. If you read threat intelligence every day like I do, then you probably have digested at least 10 different reports every week about some China nexus threat actor, gaining access to a bunch of different organizations across different sectors. So this wasn't necessarily, we didn't really see this as being really an uplift in skills for a China nexus threat actor. It's more like automating the kill chain in different unique ways. I think it maybe kind of portends for the future and what we could look like, at things at scale, and it definitely is something we need to be cognizant of. I don't think this was really a 5-alarm fire by any means, but still, it's definitely something we need to be cognizant of. It's something that we read very closely and something that, we're trying to learn from as well.
Yeah, I think similarly, the most interesting thing about it may have been the splash that it made and how much it was picked up. I think there's a debate about whether it was useful. The quality of the report from a threat intelligence perspective, when you read it, is not specifics. But there have been reports released before with those kind of specifics, and we couldn't do much with those either. And so I think the real value of this is that lightning rod, so to speak, but I don't know if it also changes how we're going to act as a defender, or really how it changes the roadmap that we see this industry to be on.
Yeah, I think that as an industry, we've witnessed this sort of democratization of destruction for a long time, whereby you can use tools that are readily available and then be able to use them without having the actual knowledge, the resources, or the skills to create them yourself, or even choose your victims. And here, this is, the harnessing of AI in many ways, like folks are already harnessing AI for productive reasons. And so I think, Steve, as you said, the orchestration, I think, is really the key piece. And I think that's, again, just the realization of what we've been all talking about as a community for a while.
What surprised me reading the report is just that it seemed like this group of bad actors got pretty far along. Like they did a lot, and before Anthropic detected what was happening. And so, Josh, I was hoping that you could talk a bit about. OpenAI now has 800 million weekly users, so that's a lot of people having conversations with ChatGPT. How does the company monitor those conversations, find bad actors, whether they're running scams or planning an espionage campaign?
Oh, well, the answer is obviously AI. No, I think everyone in this room is probably familiar with the concept of layered defense. We take a layered approach to safety, and so you're trying to layer a bunch of different measures that'll mitigate the potential for a bad actor to do bad things with your service. So that comes down to model training, model safeguards, user policy, and then you're doing different detection mechanisms, like using AI to basically try to find things that could be signatures for bad activity and try to zero in on those things. At the same time we're doing that, we're also trying to kind of balance privacy in particular. So by using different kind of signatures and mechanisms like that, we can really kind of lower our footprint and what we're looking at and what we're trying to do. I don't think we're ever going to be 100% able to prevent bad actors from doing that, but hopefully you're trying to find them as fast as possible and to mitigate that. But it's something that we have to kind of iterate on constantly, because especially with AI, things are kind of evolving very, very quickly. There's benign use cases that are evolving very quickly. There's malicious use cases that are evolving very quickly. So part of that also is being able to have a robust threat intelligence function that we can kind of use to kind of best inform what we're looking for and to find bad actors.
I think in the New York Times, we've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out how useful is AI? Like how many benefits is it bringing versus the downsides versus the harms? So Steve, I was hoping you could talk about at Amazon, you have this huge portfolio of security, which is more than just information security, it's physical infrastructure. How do you use AI? How has your job changed in the last couple of years because of it?
Sure. So I think the use of AI takes two really different paths depending on the organizational component that you're looking at. One is the adding of skills in areas where there aren't skills to begin with. And I think the democratization of really effective defense is an area that we're going to see a lot of progress in. We as a company have always had a really well-staffed, well-resourced security organization with people with the right skills to protect us. Most businesses don't have that. They don't have that luxury. And as a result, I think we're going to see some significant changes in their ability to defend themselves with the use of AI by defenders. You're talking a little bit about identifying inappropriate use of models themselves, and that problem is actually multifaceted. It's one where you both have to establish what normalcy is in the operation of a model, which is super hard, because we just don't have the data, the historical information. The second is so many defensive systems rely on really fragile components like signatures. And if you're, even in the EDR world, for example, if you're relying on an individual signature, it's going to be broken in seconds. You've got to have an engine that understands that our adversaries change. An IOC that your team develops has a lifetime that's incredibly short because the adversaries jump around so quickly. Flipping that around, the AI use that we see is not only just in the defensive world of saying, all right, what is a normal behavior on a system and how do we improve our ability to detect, but also in enabling our staff to do things that they could never do before. So things like heat mapping in video images associated with the corporate employees entering a building. It's something that our corporate security team wants to understand so they can say, where do we have risk areas? How do we make this flow more seamless so that we can get people through access control systems more effectively? We do the same thing in the world of even producing a large event. We've got reInvent coming up, which is our user conference. It's between 70,000-ish people in Las Vegas. We use a lot of AI components there to help us understand how we are protecting the individuals who are attending that, and also to influence the way that we choose who we focus on more effectively. So any security organization can only look at a certain number of things at a certain time. Where do you spend that time? We will ask a lot of our internal systems about which of these is not like the other. Which of these sticks out for some reason? I may not even realize what that reason is. But in many cases, the systems can be creative enough to say, this one sticks up because of something you didn't think about before. And I think those are going to be the real changes we're going to see.
So specifically, how is it changing how you're analyzing how people are coming in through the front door?
Taking the people coming in through the front door, dwell time of people, particular paths of people, where are they getting stopped and where are they taking time to get through access control measures? Which one of these systems is behaving abnormally compared to the others? Velocity, flow, throughput, latency. Those are all components that we can derive really useful information from when we ask the right questions to the systems that have the right access to data.
Natasha, can you talk about this? How has AI actually changed, your job, how you're doing security, if it has?
Yeah, I think Steve was alluding to some of this. When we think about the use of AI, whether it's at CoreWeave or really at any other company, it really falls in two different categories. The how you implement AI in your product and how you implement AI in your internal systems, your internal processes, and what that looks like from a day-to-day business process. And that latter portion, I think, is starting to change across all of the businesses. As Steve was alluding to, this is not just the internal security team, but folks across the business, from HR to engineering to security, all have different methods that they can use to identify areas where having a machine in the loop is a value add. We think about the data, the processes, where humans are just too slow, whether it's processing large amounts of video or processing intelligence reports. One of the slowest processes or the slowest things that we have to deal with in the intelligence world is how do I get all these PDFs that somebody gave me and get them into my system and do that in a way that is accurate. That is a great thing for a machine to help do. However, when we think about the things that we need a lot of dialogue between different individuals, very personalized, that's when you want that human in the loop. So how do you mesh together the humans and the machines in a way that makes sense within the business? And then we think about the product side and how we're presenting products to our customers. How can we enable AI to help them be more productive? Whether it's, we are a user of CrowdStrike's product and there is AI within that product that helps us be more efficient on the security side, or CoreWeave's products where we are using AI to help customers understand the health of their systems. That is all on the other side of the coin to how we think about productivity in the business world.
And Drew, we've talked a little bit about this before the panel, but it's the same job in a way. Like you have bad guys, you're trying to stop bad guys. How has AI changed that for you?
Sure, yeah. Cybersecurity has long leveraged AI for well over a decade for anomaly detection with static ML and behavioral ML to figure out what's normal, what's not normal, and then amongst the data points that aren't normal, what's actually malicious. And so defenders have long used it in that sort of way, but now defenders increasingly are able to leverage AI to actually interact with that cybersecurity data a lot more efficiently. So for example, with triaging detections. So you can get a series of detections in a security operations center, and it might be that you're weeding through false positives, but beyond that, it might be that all of them are relevant, but that doesn't mean all of them are the top priority to go and mitigate, and that's where AI already is really helping figure that out. And then for the mitigations themselves, if you need, for example, to patch a lot of systems that aren't patched, instead of having to do that in a much more cumbersome process, that's where AI today can now batch those processes a lot more efficiently. Whereas what we see with adversaries is adversaries, of course, are leveraging AI, perhaps in some of the novel ways we open this panel with, but more often than not in some of the less novel ways that everyone else is leveraging AI to write emails more efficiently and maybe with more M dashes, and you got to work on that in OpenAI. And then also to for CVs like we've seen with the North Korean IT workers, things like that. But increasingly too to sift through large amounts of data, so you can sift through a memory dump more efficiently and find tokens that are in the clear there. You can sift through a data dump from a previous breach and figure out which credentials might be valid much more efficiently. And then we think a lot about protecting the AI itself, and that really comes down to thinking about AI and its components. So thinking about the data that the AI holds or that's in the queries going to the AI, the systems that host that, and then the credentials increasingly that are enabling those interactions. And that's where I think a lot of the problem to solve going forward is going to be thinking about all these non-human identities. We think about our traditional human credentials, and that's hard enough for any of us to protect our credentials. I mean, most breaches today leverage legitimate credentials. But those non-human identities, a lot of them, unfortunately, are implemented in a way where these systems have access to things you would never trust an intern to have access to. And then you have that with agents calling upon agents and all of that access and the data like you opened with. I think that's where we really have to get that right and really focus on that anomaly detection. Once again, still a data problem, and now you're just moving and shifting where you look for that anomaly detection.
Yeah, I just got to add something on this. I think one of the other things, and just to follow on, Drew, your conversation here, is also how we think about the policy. that is attached to AI and AI implementation. How many people here have an AI agent in their company that you can ask questions about, right? How many times you've asked it a question and you've gotten an answer and you're like, why does this AI agent have access to that data? That happens all the time. And sometimes it's the way it's implemented and it's on purpose, and sometimes it's a misconfiguration. And so it's also a training problem of how we think about how we're training our employees to classify documents properly or set the security conditions properly on documents. So AI that anybody has access to within the company doesn't necessarily have access to some sensitive documentation. Another thing to think through, most companies, some do, some don't, but most I don't think monitor, if somebody's doing a Google search for mental health. This is a privacy issue, right? You can probably talk about that more than anybody. What about if somebody's using AI for mental health? How do we deal with that in our company? How do we react to those issues that may put an employee at risk or may put the business at risk? How do you monitor those systems in a way, because the ceiling is so high for what they can do. If somebody is able to type into the AI that knows that, is reading all these documents and going, how do I hack CoreWeave? Now, from an insider threat perspective, I have to worry about that. But how do from a policy and privacy standpoint, how do we respect people's privacy, but also, protect our business? And so the policy aspects and how we implement, and I hug my lawyers really tight on this one, is I think part of the challenge.
Yeah, I am curious how, what I've been writing about mostly this year is how these kind of AI systems can affect people. It's just such a different way of interacting with technology to be talking to a chatbot. Yeah, you can stray. You can start talking about, instead of the documents you're supposed to be reviewing, kind of your mental health challenges. How are you as leaders in your companies dealing with, how your employees are using these generative AI systems, the way that they're accessing the data, whether they're kind of straying off topic? Are you monitoring how they themselves use the systems that you've put in place in different ways than you have before?
I'll start off. First of all, I think that any responsible organization has some form of usage monitoring that's focused on assuring that their systems are being used responsibly. And those are disclosed in a variety of different ways. Most of us have DLP systems, data loss prevention systems, that we have to have for a variety of reasons, including regulation. And it's the what do you do with the data that matters after that data is collected. And the way our organization looks at that individually is that in order to dig into any individual human within our population, there has to be a reason to do so, which is consistent with the job of the person asking the question. The first thing we do, however, is very carefully constrain access to that data about who's using what system for what purpose. And more importantly, we monitor the use of that data and have it audited by another party who is not the owner of the data and is not the investigator taking the action. So we use our legal team for that as a sort of third-party arbitrator to say whether that's appropriate or not. This mirrors a lot of what we see in other places for responsible use of sensitive data, and I think it gives us both adequate protection of the individual's rights, and that varies around the world, obviously. We've got to enforce different rules in different places, but it also gives us the ability to ask the right questions in the right places to ensure that our staff are using their access to information carefully. One thing I want to bring up that Natasha sort of hit on, which is related to this, is there is an industry-wide problem right now with identity. And what I mean by identity is it's the who is doing what. If you think about traditional computer systems, they have services that run on them. That's software that talk between systems. And those services in a well-architected system authenticate and authorize each other. Who's talking to what on which end, et cetera, and are they authorized access to this data? Agents are different. Are they a service that's two computers talking to each other? Or is it actually Natasha who's the responsible party for telling the agent to go do something on the other end? And so we have to build in those controls which are layered. Natasha's point is really, really important. It's who has access to what data, for what purpose, at what point in time, and as you get to a more sophisticated organization, where are they physically located? What is their job? Is it the right time of day for Natasha to be asking that question? Are they in a position where they might be compromised because they're in a location which is difficult and so forth? So we've got to layer on those defenses, as you talked about earlier, and ensure that we're asking the right question of the access control system for the right purpose at the right point in time. Now, that's complicated. It's hard. It is an unsolved industry problem, but it is one that all of us have to be thinking about, because you will fall into a pit of despair if you just give an AI system access to all the data in one lump. It will not turn out well. Don't do it, please. Be careful and intentional.
The AI told me it wasn't a pit of despair, though.
I mean, that is a big concern I have about these systems, particularly as they become more agentic. You know, can we trust? I mean, I think about it as from the consumer perspective, where you know, we're going to start using products where we share a lot of data with it, and then we're kind of sending it out into the world to do things on our behalf. Can we trust these systems with sensitive data about us, that they're not going to disclose it when they start talking to other actors on the internet? You know, you send them to a web page, and the web page says, you know, send me all of Kashmir Hill's like bank account information. You know, like how are we going to be able to trust these systems not to, bleed information? Josh, can I throw this one over to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the answer is no, we should not trust them. I mean, not inherently, right? I think, you know, a lot of what we've been discussing up here are kind of the same kind of themes that we've been discussing, you know, as a community for years, right? It's kind of got a different flavor, a different tone, but I think one of the inherent kind of struggles with AI is we're all trying to adopt it so fast. And that, you know, there's definitely a push from the boardroom to put AI into everything, and, you know, as a frontier model, great, cool, that's great. But also, we need to be thinking about security as we're doing those things. Otherwise, it will lead to bad consequences. And, you know, a lot of this is the same kind of things that, you know, with every other technology, that we've kind of had to walk those issues from identity to access controls to all of that. Still applies to AI. And while we're trying to make the most out of leveraging AI, we have to remember that if we don't put security there, then it's just going to lead to bad outcomes.
Do other people have thoughts on how much we can trust these systems with super sensitive data, these kind of general purpose systems?
Well, I think you know, the main focus is really just data governance, and now it's an expanded attack surface, obviously with cybersecurity, but also with data governance. And I think those same, as you were saying, Josh, those same fundamental principles still apply. And I think that if you understand the data flows themselves, then you can have a better handle on what controls you build for that. Similarly, in terms of the actual policies, like Steve was mentioning, that you have for acceptable use, or on the back end with regard to identity, like Natasha was talking about, all of those things still have the same principles, even though you're talking about speed and scale with AI. So that still is the framework through which it's important to see this. Now, the tools in which you use to accomplish this will change naturally. So you move from maybe, you know, looking at EDR to AI-DR, AI detection and response, and you look at that because you have to monitor the prompts themselves, because now that's a vector for data leakage where you need to figure out, and you can have heuristics that figure out if, you know, there's sensitive data going out the door, but also that's a vector where prompts can be the new malware too, because that can be code, and you're protecting from sentences instead of traditional scripts or code. And so I think from a principle standpoint, though, it's all the same principles you're applying.
Are there new challenges, though, to dealing with the technology that is, when we're talking about generative AI, non-deterministic, probabilistic? You know, I basically have been writing all year about how the guardrails can degrade on this. Are there new challenges to a system like that, or is that something you feel like you have dealt with before with other technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's new challenges to any technology. But at the end of the day, for us on the implementation side, we're thinking about what are the guardrails that we need to put into play. Thinking about, okay, if you know, depending on what the AI bot or the AI chat or whatever, however you're implementing is supposed to do. Because I think for different implementations, if you're having an AI implementation that is providing medical advice, that may be a very different level of trust that you have to have in what that you know, application is providing than something that is providing somebody travel advice. And as implementers, we have to think about how we reduce that risk for our critical systems, the same as we would for any other critical system, but how we do that specifically in this context is different and very specific to to AI. And so I think we've been talking to some vendors that say, okay, we run these questions through one model, and then we take a second model and we ask it to check the first model's work. That's one way of looking at that. A second way of looking at how we do this risk reduction is we think through what processes do I have where the machine is the value, having the machine in the loop is providing me with that capability, and what do I have to test, right? We very rarely in other systems go straight to production. We put something in implementation, we don't test it, we don't go through focus groups, we don't try in anything, and we just go straight to activity. We don't do that in most cases. Why are we doing it in an AI case? So I think there's a need for us as managers, as leaders in this organization, in our own organizations and across the industry, to do this in a way that gets value, but also gives us a chance to get it right and make sure that we're not introducing a lot of risk into our environments.
I'd like to amplify something that Natasha just said, and I think it's important when you actually implement AI services inside your organization, doing so with intent, number one, and not just saying, give me some AIs, and number two, doing it in a layered fashion. And layers have a construct that gives you the resilience that you need to survive situations where the model may do something that you don't expect or you don't want. So there is the be watcher, one model checking the other model method, and that certainly is valid in some cases, especially where you use smaller models which are very intentionally built. So they have specific sets of data that they have access to, and they can't regurgitate something they don't know about. The second piece is building the right guardrails around the models that you're using. It's been forever in the real world of computers that you don't give one component permission to hold both the information that's interesting and the logs about the information, to use a simple example. Because what is the first thing the adversary does? They get in and they wipe the logs. So you store them somewhere else with some other credentials that somebody else doesn't have access to, et cetera. Why are we relying on one model to be both policeman and the commerce provider? Or one model is doing both the guardrails and providing the information back? We need to be intentional, careful, layered. We need to build in specific guardrails that say this is okay, this is not okay. And we need to keep track of who did what so that we can analyze it appropriately to see, was this behavior what we expected, or is it out of the norm? And that, by the way, takes time to develop, because what is normalcy in the use of AI, especially if we pushed it all out yesterday and it's brand new? We don't know. We've got to go figure that out. That takes building up that set of logs. And by the way, if anybody says that keeping logs is expensive, they do not know what they're talking about. Keeping logs is incredibly cheap if you do it the right way. Just please keep the logs.
I'm curious, within your organization so far, are these new challenges, new uses of generative AI, creating more work for you or more efficiencies for you?
You're looking right at me. Okay, so are they creating more work or more efficiencies? The answer is yes. They're creating more work for my team, which is awesome because we get to work on new areas, which is always fun. They are also creating new efficiencies. So I will say that what we've, some statistics, our software development engineers who are using Kiro, which is our IDE that's backed by a set of AI agents, are doing about 42% more code commits per week, and they are doubling their production of software when they're using it. And this is not something they've been using for a long time. This is something they're just getting into the rhythm of using and the rhythm of the build systems, et cetera. I think that more importantly on my team, on the security teams though, we are seeing dramatic improvements in the efficiency of our security engineers. And the really cool thing though that's coming out of this is the security engineers are happier with their jobs at the end of it, because they're getting out of the business of doing the grunt work. Because remember, when you're doing a security investigation of something, it used to be that a huge portion of what you did was preparing all the data so that you could understand what happened, and then asking a bunch of questions, and then trying to connect the dots back through systems, et cetera. Well, guess what? There are AI tools that can do a lot of that prep work for you and also point you at interesting things. You know, this one's different than all of the rest. Start here. Doesn't mean they're always right, because quite often the systems have never seen the behavior before, so they're just kind of predicting whether something is interesting or not. But implemented in the right way, it can be super useful and actually increase your velocity dramatically as a defender.
Does this really apply to me? I don't know. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously.
AI's creating a lot of work for you. And you're
Yes.
new to OpenAI. We should say you've been there for two months?
2 months.
Yeah.
2 months, so I am a veteran. Yes, I'm a veteran. Okay. But I mean, no. I mean, I think I agree completely. It's almost, it's yes to both questions, but it creates new work. It's different kinds of work. How you work kind of changes. And like, for someone like me, I was in the Army at one point in my life, which I think that means I'm supposed to be really good at PowerPoint, but I'm not good at PowerPoint. But being able to just kind of like say, like, hey, I need a graphic that looks like these kind of things. Would have taken me 4 hours. It would have been horrible. And I can get something that looks really good, in the matter of seconds. Or to be able to write an outline on, this is the kind of policy that I'm scoping out, write my outline and then say, hey, chat, this is what I'm trying to do. Give me your example, and say like, oh, I didn't think about that, and like being able to roll that in. It really makes it so you kind of get that second kind of pair of eyes on things. It can be really enlightening and great. And that's why I think hopefully that is the future, where it it's almost like computers, where it just changes that kind of work. It changes the work that we're doing, and makes it richer at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to change my answer from any of these guys. I think it's definitely both, but it's both in different ways. As we think about implementing AI, I have the distinction, I guess, of being at a company that is very, very new. And so we don't have a lot of tech debt, but everything is being built very, very quickly. And I think a lot of that is being enabled by the use of AI in the right ways. And it's certainly helping us accelerate our velocity on the cybersecurity side and security really writ large across the company as the company grows and has doubled this year and will probably double again next year. That is a very hard pace for humans to keep up with. So having that capability enables us to get there. At the same time, we are growing that fast, and so is the AI use around the company. And so I think it also changes our mindset a little bit internal to security about what is our priority. How are we going to monitor these systems? And what was priority before the use of this technology throughout the company or would have existed is not exactly the same priority as we're going to have today in a company that makes very, very good use of AI throughout both production and internal processes.
I think a primary challenge for many of the organizations we protect is that the AI is disappearing into their tech stack in much the same way decades ago. Maybe people would have paid more attention to the intricacies of DNS queries and whatnot, and then that gradually disappeared similarly. And so part of the challenge, but also the opportunity of AI, is then being able to bring visibility into those risks posed with regard to all the things we talked about with data leakage, prompt injection, et cetera, and understanding that context and how much context matters. But I think that's where then there is this immense, already here, opportunity with AI to really upskill cybersecurity analysts, where cybersecurity analysts are able to get a lot more done in a single day than they used to be able to, because to the point you were making, Steve, they would spend all their time prepping the data, then querying off of the data, pivoting off of different data points, and now all of that can be done through natural language instruction, done relatively instantly. And then there's still the hard work of doing the work itself to harden systems and whatnot, but a lot of that work that really would have required a lot more experience, you can now take a junior analyst, let them do that senior level work, which is fantastic, because then people can be a lot more efficient. So I think, AI poses this or offers this incredible opportunity, and I think that's here today.
So we just have 1 minute left. So I guess my final question would just be, this afternoon session opened with there's more threats than ever. At the same time, we have AI that is supposed to help us fight those threats. So I guess what's your level of fear about what AI represents versus excitement about how it's going to help you fight those threats and keep your organizations more secure?
Well, if you have to focus on fear as a defender, you're sunk, because yes, all the threats are out there. But in reality, I think this is one of those rare circumstances where we have a real sea change opportunity in the defensive space. If we use AI appropriately, it can accelerate what we do. It can make us more effective. It can train our employees more rapidly than they could otherwise to upskill them, as was mentioned before. But most importantly, it gives us the opportunity to explore areas of defense that we did not have time for before. So we can think more deeply about how can we protect against these things we never had a chance to because we were so busy doing the other drudge work that's out there.
Yeah, maybe I'm like an optimist, but I feel like, we've come so far as a community as far as like how cybersecurity should work, and we have so much farther to go, but we're not starting at zero. And I just think, because of that, we'll be able to like leverage AI into those processes, into those frameworks, and hopefully, we'll end up tipping the scales in our favor for once.
I'm not an optimist, but I am a realist. And I think AI is here. It's not going away. It will become more and more ingrained in how we do business. And so whether it's, my role as a manager or, as I think about our industry just generally, I think where we have to push ourselves and where we have to invest is in the education of how to implement and the skills to be able to implement AI responsibly and with value throughout all of our businesses, because that's where it's going.
Speed and scale have long been the challenges in cybersecurity, trying to be as fast as the adversary, rather faster than the adversary, and keep up with the scale of potential destruction. And so naturally, AI is an accelerant for all of that, for adversaries for sure. So from a destructive capability perspective, I think we're right to be concerned. But with that said, you fight AI with AI. And I think defensively, again, as AI has been part and parcel of cybersecurity for a long time, it's going to continue to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And really, it's going to be a matter of getting a lot of these principles we've long focused on with regard to the right identity now moved over and apply those concepts to non-human identities as these systems interact. Anomaly detection that we've used for machine events, applying that in the AI world as well. And I think that this is something that makes me an optimist.
Thank you so much.